attack systems like the and the end. With all this technological development, with the strategy of Israel forces and defense, and the development of the Iron Dome, but still the Palestinian resistance, with their limited abilities that are not comparable with the Israeli forces, they could really maintain good reputation in Tufan al-Aqsa and the previous war with their limited abilities, and they showed how this system have downsides that did not stop the Palestinians to send rockets and to attack by rockets, and they made the Israelis or the Palestinians to think about also new ideas to overcome this thing. And with also Al Ayyash 250 rockets, which was recently developed, and also the field operations, which helped them in looking at a sudden attack with a big number of rockets to the that will really hinder the ability of the Iron Dome. If we look at the land operations, they were focusing on Tel Aviv attack because it's very important geopolitically, and this what led to the failure of the Iron Dome to protect all the rockets to go where the Solution next to Tel Aviv was there, which will lead to a number of questioning from Israelis to the ability of the defense forces and the Iron Dome to protect them as people of Israel if another parties go to other fronts. Also, the development of resistance in West Bank, they develop a number of rockets home manufactured. This is a threat to also the Israeli people, and if they imitate, I mean the West Bank people imitate the people of Gaza.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. You gave us rich information on the fight development of the resistance movements, and your lecture with Dr. Omar presentation gives us a glimpse of hope that the other side is strong as well. But we will talk about another type of tactics, which is intelligence tactics. Dr. Muhanad, Assistant Professor in the Critical Security Studies program, co-researcher in the Exeter Research Center in the UK, where he studied before. His research interests focus on the military groups, defense studies, and intelligence studies. Published many books on the role of the national and ethnic flights as PKK in the north of Iraq. Also the development of the Iraqi intelligence system as well. You have 20 minutes. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, Dr. Saeed, on the presentation, and I welcome our audience and through the social platform. We would like to thank Dr. Omar Ashour and Dr. Ahmed Hussein on their presentations and on presenting a military analysis on the Tufan al-Aqsa. And it is clear that the efficacy and efficiency of Israel's military efficiency cannot be undermined, and it cannot be compared to the capacities and potentials of the Palestinian resistance movements. How this intelligence failure happened in predicting the Tufan al-Aqsa operation, whereas Israeli claims and its security forces are the strongest in the world, Alfred Einstein says that one of the cleverness symptoms is the ability to imagine, but not the knowledge. And it looks like Israel failed to imagine that a militant group like the military resistant movement, such as Hamas, can overcome its advanced and acute uh, intelligence systems, in addition to the cooperation with other intelligence systems and regimes. History will register that Tufan al-Aqsa operation is the greatest and the biggest intelligence failure in the history of Israel. And as we hear from some analysts in Israel and beyond, the Tufan Aqsa operation is compared to 11th September Al-Qaeda attacks against the United States in 2001, in addition to the War of 1973, launched by Egypt and Syria. The comparisons are clear here, and they are symbolic. The Tufan al-Aqsa took place on the 7th of October and 2023, whereas the Yom Kippur took place on the 6th of October 1973. Among the direct consequences, and we talked about that many times, for the Tufan al-Aqsa on Israel, it disrupted the Israeli illusion about security, and it fragmented the Israeli fear and pain. But how did this happen? How can we interpret this intelligence failure? Before I start, I quote that the spokesperson or Israeli army, Daniel Hagari, when he was asked, why did you fail intelligence-wise, he said that we first fight, then we investigate. This is a signal that Israeli security systems do not have full information to know the reasons of this intelligence failure. So the strategic surprise took place against the Israeli intelligence forces. Israel failed to explore and discover or to predict the military operation, and Dr. Ahmed Ashour and Ahmed Hussein provided a description of what happened on the 7th of October. But to understand the depth of this intelligence failure, we can just showcase or mention some of the operations by the resistant movements. On 7th of October, the resistance movements launched an attack against the iron dome containing 10 rocket launchers, including about 60 to 80 interceptive rockets. The Al-Muqawama, or the Palestinian resistant forces, launched more than 3,000, about 2,000 rockets against Israel, and the Israeli defense system was violated. And how can the Palestinian resistance was able to hide all the rocket launchers, and this large number of rocket launchers from Gaza Strip to Israel? And this strip, comparatively or relatively, is not that big. How was the resistance able to hide all these rocket launchers? Launching thousands of rockets against Israel, in addition to the availability to the corps, the first corps of the elite forces, whose number was about 4,000 fighters or militants, followed by 1,000 militants. Where are the intelligence systems or devices in Israel? Though they are externally and internally, all of them failed to predict with this attack. I will detail later on. do these systems fail, or do they have the information but they did not move in that direction? Was the failure in obtaining the information or in analyzing the information and dealing with this information? There are other ways of the assault. There were the glider or gliding planes and sailing planes that crossed over the iron wall. But this is symbolic, but because of the high technology that it contains, such as radars, and attempts by the resistance movement meant to excavate tunnels below the wall, all using the drones in addition to the balloons that fly in the sky, and they have a bird eye view and videos to control and the wall, and all are directed by computer that are operated by the AI in addition to the human observation. So breaching some lands that under the Israeli control through the sea. All these operations and attempts, Israel failed to explore or to discover, or failed to analyze the data that it received in a timely manner. Naturally, even Hamas itself claimed that it was surprised on the easiness of penetrating and breaching the Israeli lands. And here I quote, with when we were surprised by this collapse in the Israeli army and the Israeli intelligence, and it looks like that army was just a paper, an army paper army. And up till now, even from the press-wise, or we did not receive or we did not see any report that analyzes or explaining this intelligence failure, maybe due to some Israeli opposition parties. And according to my information, there are no reports in that regard up till this moment. We need to highlight or to also that the military operations and what comes after the and what came after the Tawaf al-Aqsa is still ongoing. And among the available information till now, whether through the media or statements by Israelis or by the resistance movements, we may put our finger on some of the main reasons for this intelligence failure. First, and this was signaled or was hinted to in Israel, the escalating is the accelerating Israeli dependence on technology in its military forces. This in terms of the military digitalization of its systems, whether in the intelligence departments, or I mean in the assaulting or the combating or to encounter intelligence of the Israeli intelligence devices or systems or departments. Israel, after the 1973 war in October, it started to build its military forces or potentials and capacities that depends on the strength of defensive reactions and against the enemy countries, or to deter such enemies, whether internally or other strategic objectives that go beyond the surrounding neighboring countries, except Lebanon for Hezbollah. And Hezbollah was mentioned in this seminar and in the published military analysis that fighting with Israel was clear over the past 10 years between Hezbollah and Israel. As for the resistance movements, they attacked the posts spreading on the what is called iron wall due to the weakness in Israeli defensive systems, and as Dr. Ahmed and Dr. Omar on the cyber potentials of the resistant movements and the disruption of these devices. But maybe the high landmark here that deviated or that eliminated the Israeli intelligence devices is to destroying the antennas on the wall through the drones, through the drones. The resistance movements targeted these blind posts and obscured them and damaged the electronic cameras, and it was easy for the movements to breach this wall, though maybe it only needed a number of excavators and bulldozers to just breach that wall and to penetrate the Israeli or the occupied lands. On the military aspect, the intelligence failure is clear because there are some of the loopholes for many reasons, such as technology, but it's not the only reason. Technology cannot stand for all the intelligence failure with this size. In addition, Israel failed because it is accelerating dependence on the technology and in not using the conventional ways and the intelligence, which is the human resources, which are the human resources. Or any intelligence failure is considered as an intelligence success for the resistance movements, though they are very limited. And naturally, it is very clear that the Israeli failure versus the intelligence success of the resistance movements. Israel, ever since 2007, till the 7th of October of Tufan al-Aqsa, failed to deploy human resources from the resistance movements. And the human resources that were deployed or that were used, they are of a dual usage, and they were in the knowledge of the resistant movements. And this gave the Israeli side the information that it wanted to hear. In addition to the Israeli signal or predictive weaponry was the only in the intelligence field. So the American side, which was able to observe and to control Gaza Strip, has transformed its human and technology potentials for other services such as or places such as Ukraine. The Israeli intelligence system was the only system that was observing the Palestinians' side. And here comes one of the main mistakes of the Israeli intelligence, which is underscoring or undermining the Palestinians' potentials of the resistance forces and the resistance movements in the intelligence field. The intelligence movements were aware with using the double agent tactics, and also the other is the signal or the division that uses these electronic devices and broadcast information that Israel wanted to listen or to hear. And that was clear through the initial reports published by the Israeli side. And there are other aspects and other reasons for this intelligence failure. And, in Israel, they thought that the resistance movements are focusing on the economic aspect due to a large number of Palestinian workers working in the occupied lands under Israeli control, and Hamas was not ready or was not thinking about another confrontation with Israel so that it does not lose its economic privileges. A large number of Israeli workers were working at high wages and salaries in going from Gaza Strip to Israeli occupied to the occupied lands by Israel or in the settlements surrounding Gaza. So this is one of the intelligence failure on the 1973 war, is that the Israeli intelligence was listening to Sadat and its threats that if the Egyptian demands are not achieved, we will launch a war against Israel. And so the reoccurring information maybe, according to the intelligence analyst, there will not be a confrontation or a fight. And one of the Israeli newspapers, Haaretz, mentioned that the intelligence report appeared before Tawafan al-Aqsa that the Palestinian resistance movements are not thinking about an attack against Israel. Maybe there is a classical mistake or that some of the intelligence analysts that committed by them, which is undermining or the de-appreciation or degrading the danger of the enemy or the foe. So Israel was not looking only to the Palestinian resistance movements as weak, but to undermine and to scorn the ability and the potentials of those movements. And this aspect, or Israel will not recover from this mistake, not only after years, but maybe it needs decades. And now the intelligence failure is not only affecting Israel internally, but externally. And one of the secrets behind Israel's strong intelligence fame, because it possesses, not only because it possesses or owns the technology and the experts, but the intelligence networks that that is connection with, or that connects Israel to a lot of other intelligence networks all over the world. Naturally, as I mentioned in the beginning, Albert Einstein stating this statement signals to what happened in 11th of September in the United States. The Congress investigation results, the first point in that report was that one of the U.S. intelligence failure in to imagine that a small military group such as Al-Qaeda may implement an operation with this size, with this complexity against the United States. And this applies also to Israel, as it was not able to imagine that the Palestinian resistance movements can launch a military attack against us with these complexities, and to prepare and to misguide the Israeli aspect at different levels or at all levels, such as e-disruption, breaching or interception of the Israeli intelligence devices and system, and also the human resources due to the by managing the human intelligence, and Israel failed to recognize or to realize the potentials and the capacity of the other movements' intelligence, and also the misuse of what we call the double agents. And I may explain that in the questions and Q&A's round. A great dependence on the technology added some of the weakness points in Israel. Israeli security forces deployed a lot of its forces in the West Bank because the government of Israel can be described as the government of settlements and settlers, and it transformed or shifted many of its forces from the Gaza Strip or from Gaza borders to the West Bank, and this explains the just a few numbers or the low number of intelligence devices or intelligence people on the borders of Gaza, because the number of intelligence was just a few if compared to the number that was deployed in the West Bank or before that 2014. There are other factors behind this intelligence failure, and maybe these factors maybe were the most important. I may conclude my comments very briefly for the reasons of this failure. Maybe the most important reason is the accelerating dependence of Israeli on technology. And Israel also maybe forgot that the resistant movements cannot meet face to face. So the absence of the American side has greatly affected the Israeli intelligence competences and potentials, because it failed to control and observe and to monitor the Palestinian resistance movements who used, and as they said, that the Palestinian resistant movements have a control and command center beneath Al-Shifa hospital. The American intelligence report here, it is full of lies, and here the American side or USA now came to observe the Palestinian resistant movements in Gaza once again, and this can explain why the Israeli intelligence department failed to observe or to predict the military attack on the 7th of October. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Muhanad, for your intervention, valuable intervention. And you spoke about the attacks of October 7th was a failure, intelligence failure, which is the biggest one in Israel, and you provided a number of evidences and indicators about that, and we encourage you for your information, and we are thanking you. And if you look at the movements and the limited information, and I think that the history of this war intelligence-wise needs a lot of information from both sides. And unfortunately, the first party, a lot of the resistant people are martyrs in the combat, and a lot of valuable information goes with them without getting any of this information for the researchers, and that's why it's very difficult for the researchers in the sociology to look at that. The fourth speaker today with us is Dr. Ina Rudolf, and Ina is Ina is a senior research fellow in the International Center for the Study of Radicalism and the postgraduate research fellow at the Center of the Study of the Society. And she got from London, and she got the research and her PhD degree on the study working as the World Studies Department at the King College London, and
وهي حاصلة على الماجستير في العلوم السياسية
degree from Islamic Studies in University of Heidelberg, and specialized in conflict resolution, peace building, and political Islam. In addition to her field work in Iraq, she lived in Libya, Yemen, Egypt, Tunisia, and Palestine. She'll be speaking, Dr. Ina will be speaking about the regional dimension of Tufan al-Aqsa and the Iraqi point of view to that, and linking to the resistance, led by Iran. Dr. Ain, if you are listening, can you please start?
Thank you very much for this introduction, and also to Muhanad and Omar for inviting me to participate in this panel. As promised, I will be addressing today the geopolitical aspects, taking Iraq as a case study. So I would really like to begin with the main lessons from the last round of escalations on the Iraqi resistance front that happened almost in parallel with the truce agreement. So actually, despite what many resistance activist veterans refer to as wahdat al-sahad, or the unity of battlefields, the synchronization of battlefields, I argue that the execution of this transnational responsibility to resist would depend first and foremost on the domestic agendas and the stakes of locally embedded and nationally minded militant actors. So what does this mean? I argue that a truce on the Palestinian front, and actually the course of the war in Gaza, would not be the sole variables determining actually the resistance operations on the domestic front. And why is this differentiation important? I'm blinded sometimes by this prism of proxy warfare, proxy sponsor relations between Iran and multiple allies in the region. A lot of analysts, after the killing of Qasem Soleimani and Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, expected the Iraqi response to be merely a function of the Iranian retaliation for their martyr. Now, what many analysts also underestimated and neglected was the messaging of a lot of resistance veterans, such as Qais al-Hazali, Abu Ala al-Walai, who made it very clear that while Iran might have taken vengeance for their martyr, the blood of Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis is still to be revenged by his Iraqi brothers in arms in a way that they see adequate and fit in the national context. Now, with the Iraqi resistance arena being a highly contested one, the aesthetics and actually the tactics of these resistance operations were often very contradictory. Many factions, especially those from within the so-called Iran-aligned Wala'i camp, did not see eye to eye on how best to engage the common enemy in a way that it serves, or at least it does not jeopardize, their domestic interests. Today, we are witnessing a similar form of resistance dialectics. Many of the main protagonists have much more stakes and much more representation in the power sharing system. So this would logically compel them actually to up their game of plausible deniability, and also to excel in their juggling of multiple state and non-state identities. To illustrate, many of the attacks on the US coalition forces were conducted under the label of the Islamic resistance in Iraq. Or more defiantly, sometimes the factions use their original names, being Qata'ib Hezbollah or Sar'a al-Khorasani or Qata'ib Sayyid al-Shuhada. But whenever they were hit by the US forces, they all fall back onto their PMF affiliation, calling actually on the Iraqi government to address the violation of Iraqi sovereignty. This strategic vision so far has been to accumulate bonus points or resistance credentials on the transnational front as autonomously operating and morally driven muqawama actors, while keeping the PMF brand, which is also one of their main economic lifelines, clean enough so that its state-sanctioned status is not compromised. Now, the last statement of Abu Hussein al-Hamidawi demonstrates this balancing act is likely to continue, and this is regardless of the outcome of the war in Gaza and regardless of the outcome of the truce agreement. Actors like Abu Ala al-Wala'i or Akram al-Qa'abi, Qais al-Hazali, have already started very clearly to mobilize domestically for the expulsion of US forces from Iraq. And this has been a long-standing vision that's likely also to persist regardless of any truces or escalations on the Palestinian front. Now, why is this not surprising after all? Reading between the lines, this echoes concretely both Iran's messaging, but also Hassan Nasrallah's most recent speeches. First, Iran has a clear interest in claiming plausible deniability as the one actor who equips and supports, but at the end gets to wash its hands of the operations of its allies and its constantly actors and resistance leaders that are nationally omnipresent, such as Hassan Nasrallah, particularly want to be seen as patriotically motivated leaders that on the one hand have this transnational sense of justice and also commitment to resisting injustice, but then also remain accountable to domestic audiences. Therefore, it comes as no surprise that this rhetoric or this recurring theme of we are grateful to our Iranian brothers and we are sympathetic with our Palestinian friends keeps repeating in Iraq. But it should not be conflated with a blind compliance to the terms of any truce, either on the Palestinian front or as a matter of fact, even in the context of US-Iran relations. And another demonstration of this argument is one of the latest interviews with the leader of Asaib Ahl al-Haq, Qais al-Hazali. So in the interview, of course, along condemning the latest attacks that costed the lives of 9 PMF fighters from Kataib Hezbollah in Jurf al-Sahar, Qais al-Hazali also addressed the issue of US forces exercising self-restraint when attacking Iranian interests in Syria, basically claiming that whenever they would attack Iranian interests in Syria, they would be very, very cautious that no Iranian gets killed. While on the Iraqi front, the shedding of Iraqi blood is basically something that they would not shy away from. And he also made it very clear that this violation of Iraqi dignity would no longer be tolerated. Now, in the context of the current dynamics in Iraq, I would argue specifically that the actors from within this transnational resistance alliance are better equipped to shoulder any future blows, but also to escalate to an extent that allows them to evade responsibility and still to continue protecting their state affiliation with the PMF while upping their operations on the domestic front as autonomously operating resistance units. And those are my main takings. I wanted to leave more space for questions. Thank you very much.
شكرا جزيلا.
We would like to thank Dr. Iman for her rich presentation. And without any further ado, And due to the time limitation, we will open the floor for discussion, and we will receive your questions. And we start with Dr. Hani, and then followed by the others. I would like to thank all the presenters with due respect to their names and titles. I have a comment and a question to Dr. Omar Ashour. The first comment in regard to the goals. Maybe it is worth mentioning in the history of the Palestinian National Liberation Movement and their battles, the goal was not just relevant to against Israel. Sometimes some of the internal goals maybe were more important than the external goals. And here I mean all the battles, including Al-Karama 1968 battle, and in Lebanon, Al-Litani battle, and also Lebanon invasion 1980. The strategy was internal. Sooner or later, we will find that one of the main factors for the reasons for this operation is to reconsider the strategic relation with Israel. And in my opinion, it could be in military and armed attack and military conflict between Hamas and Israel, and Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. And this also draws to other military movements. Do we just consider these goals as we consider for the arms goal? As for the ground war, the point in regarding to the internal siege from the middle and the external siege, especially the Gaza Strip crossing and the cut of supplies. And this is from the statements of American and Israeli experts in regard to the supply. We are talking about 300 tanks and armed vehicles, which are very active, performing the siege, and a number of 30 to 50,000 of anti-tank devices. So practical-wise, the limitation or the aim of the airstrikes are clear after the passage of 1 month of the ground invasion. If we consider this status or this situation now in this very hundreds of tanks and armed vehicles confronted by some of the anti-tank devices in light of a tunnel network that the Israelis cannot achieve their goals very quickly. Do you think that mitigate the condition of the supplies? The one beside you, please. Amjad Jibril, Palestinian researcher. I have 5 comments. I will start from international into internally or to Palestinian or to Hamas. First question relates to what is the explanation between the development of the Palestinian operations and the international factor, where the regional dimension retreated back because it was not able to provide aid or to help in the ceasefire. The second question, or What's your perspective, or what is your perception on the consequences of this battle on the regional normalization relation with Israel? Maybe the one case is that of Mauritania in 2009, and another example of of the year 2000, when some of the commercial offices were closed in some Arab countries. And the third track is the continuation of the normal regional normalization could be one result. Gaza Strip is a very important area in the Palestinian issue, and Al-Qassam brigades added too much. But to what extent that Gaza Strip alone can lead the Palestinian struggle or fighting, or to overpass the West Bank? What is the relation between Hamas and Israel and Hamas? Does this confrontation, or has this confrontation changed this relation, that there are no middle solutions? And I think there is a possibility for some of the medium solutions. And maybe the last point that relates to Dr. Ahmed's presentation, the political goals of Hamas to launch a military confrontation and fight with the tactic-wise is okay, but what comes after in terms of the political aspect? Now, all people know that there is an Arab resilience, and such as in 1973 and in the Lebanon invasion, and a good military performance. But what is Hamas policy? Where it places itself in regard to the Palestinians' overall fighting and the struggle against Israel? Thank you. I am a visiting researcher. Thank you for your comments and presentations. I have a number of questions that were absent from the lectures. I opted to listen to some of the analysis have not been mentioned by you. First point, the issue of the human losses. Was that were they a reaction and of Israeli failure to destruct Hamas and its structure, and this was an avenge against Hamas? Or is it part of the Israeli strategy to evacuate as many people as possible, and to practice or to apply what we call forced displacement of the Palestinians from the north? Also, in regard to the truce or the contemporary truce, is there a possibility to expand this truce? And also, this gives the resistance movements a great push forward. And now there are certain slogans and chants in Ramallah that supports Al-Daif and other supporters. Also, about the American officers who were deployed also helping Israel in these battles. And I heard that about 6 to 7 officers were killed in these U.S. officers were killed. What about the military data about Israel? It is very important to follow up and to explain or to analyze the military statements issued by some Israeli officers and officials, whether they are credible or incredible, authenticated or not authenticated. Finally, what is the role of the Palestinians of the 1948 occupied lands? I wanted to hear about their role. You talked about Gaza front, South Lebanon front, West Bank front. But what about the Arabs or the Israeli Arabs? Or what was Israel's control and the attempt to control the Arab Israelis in the 1948 occupied lands? Because in the year 2021 they moved and they had a certain role in those clashes. Just we want you to raise questions, not comments. Your question, please, Saif, then Rashid. Thank you for the presenters who talked in this rich seminar. My question is due to the absence of talking of the fighting model of the Al-Qassam brigades and Al-Quds Saraya, or brigades. Based on the videos, how they use the face-to-face fighting, or to fighting from the 0 point or from the 0 distance, there is a different type of fighting now, and there are some new weapons that are used in the streets. There are new tactics. Even the Israeli media talked about that, and how do they leave the tunnels, and how did they enter the tunnels, and how did they leave the tunnels, and other explosive devices of using the GBJ and destroying the armed vehicles, and to what extent such of these devices cause a lot of destruction as claimed by Hamas. How do you, and there is also something about the difference of the performance of the Al-Qassam brigades and Al-Quds Saraya. There is a big difference in the weapons and in the results that they achieve. While talking about of destroying more than 300 Israeli armed vehicles. And despite the Israeli talking about some of areas which are, they are scorched land in Beit Hanun and other northern parts of Gaza. And another thing about the report that was published by before days on about Corps FG, which is one of the American mercenaries that came to fight within Gaza on the ground, or not only through the official role that is given by or played by some of the American highly expert or high experienced officers. And thank you. Rashid. Dr. Irina is with us on the WebEx. If you want to direct some questions to her, peace be upon you. My first question is directed to Dr. Omar and Dr. Ahmed. The current truce can be followed by other upcoming truces, but in general, the high tension of the conflict is reduced, and some of the air strikes and the marine and the sea operation now are reduced. What is the influence on the resistance potentials and capacities now and in the future? My second question to Dr. Muhanad: what is the effect and the impact of the internal and the Israeli political crises and divisions to weaken Israeli potentials and capacities? My question is to so Ina, you focused on the dynamics of relations between Iran and its proxy fighters such as Hezbollah. Do you think that studying those groups can help us understand the strategic decisions of Hamas and Al-Qassam brigades, though there are certain sectorial differences, social differences, language differences, because I think researchers in the West stress on studying those groups and forget about Al-Hamas and compare that to Hamas and Al-Qassam brigades. The other question is, what are the learned lessons for the Arab intelligence armies after this fight and battle after these battles?
Thank you, Rashid. And two more interventions, and then from you, and then from the one beside you, Amin Al-Ashqar. I have three questions. The first one is for Dr. Ahmed in relation to the Northern Front. The infiltration that happened by Al-Qassam brigade, does this bring back the people or the Palestinian camps to the surface, and nobody attacked the camps in Lebanon, Palestinian camps before, but would this be one of the targets of Israeli again? The second question for Dr. Omar is the combating the revolution theories. When we look at that, is it not possible for rebellion? David Petraeus said that it's impossible nearly the target of Israel to have in Gaza. Is it nearly impossible? So what was the objective or the target of Israel in the land operation? Because we know that they will not be capable of ending or eliminating Hamas. The second question, what is the evaluation of the Hamas capabilities of resistance and their performance security-wise and intelligence-wise in comparison with other armed forces or other armed groups? Amani, my name is Amani. I want to say in the Tufan al-Aqsa, and is the second cross, let's say, because it's the biggest cross and it's a slap on the face of Israeli. Why? Because the media made the Israeli forces exposed because of this crossing, and it really have them confused, let's say. And for the military capabilities, nobody denies that the Israeli forces are very strong, but it was evident now, and as the doctor said, it's a strong technology and technology. But if we compare the thinking in the land war and the military planning, I think that the resistance in Palestine or the Palestinian resistance is really more capable than the Israeli forces. And for the civilians who came into 7th of October, I don't think that this is a downside of the planning of the Tufan al-Aqsa, but because of the lack of information and about this day, so they could not announce for the civilians to announce for them to go out before the attack is happening. They cannot make this clear for them. There were some people from the cyber attacks, and they got a number of the soldiers with their numbers and where they are living. Would this affect the role of the soldiers and their concern to go into the land conflict? Because there are a lot of resigns, a lot of people who left Israel, and a lot of them were concerned. So is this list, which was hacked, will affect the Israeli soldiers? Thank you very much for your questions. Now we'll open the floor for the professors and researchers to answer your questions, and we'll start with Dr. Aina. Please, can you start, Dr. Aina?
أعتقد لديك سؤال.
Thank you very much. I'm really grateful to this question because I personally resist a lot like this sectarian prism when analyzing the different groups. I am convinced that by studying the behavior and actually like the lack of compliance sometimes of these Iran-aligned actors when it comes like to major escalations on their domestic front can give us important insights also about the mode of engagement that Hamas chooses in certain points in time. After all, like we're dealing here with a transnational resistance alliance with a very deep enshrined sense of cross-border solidarity. But all of its members like have very specific agendas and very specific audiences in their home countries, in their home battlefield. So I think like by studying the Iraqi groups, by understanding how we witness different tactics, different approaches, even like within the more closely aligned, let's say Iran-supported camp, we can preempt that the way Hamas would operate cannot be taken away like from the local context, like from what Hamas wants to achieve in terms of post-war Gaza governance. And therefore, I do suggest like keeping an eye on how like these different actors operate within the resistance alliance, and not trying to subsume their domestic agendas like to this larger, more generalized prism of proxy warfare. Thank you very much.
شكرا.
الأماكن الخارجية الداعمة. شكرا دكتورة إينا ودكتور عمر. Thank you for your questions. The questions needs maybe one whole conference or symposium. I don't know. I want to answer a lot of questions here, but Dr. Hani, in relation to the decisions related to the internal conflicts, the strategies that are happening in the armed conflict and also in the country, the bureaucratic politics, is how to respond to Cuban rockets, and this is in the U.S. And I agree with you. Maybe this is one dimension, interpretation dimension for what happened in October 7th. But until now, I'm not really sure, and I cannot say yes or no. And I try to understand that from the strategic aspect related to the control on the land and the release of hostages, or to repoliticize, to make the issue political issue again. And as Dr. Amjad said, there is a dilemma and the strategy that they should have a strategic target or objective. So they should ask them what is the objective of this conflict. But the conflict will identify that the people in the field are the people who know that, and according to the outcome of this battle, maybe the political surface will be higher or lower. This is in this war and other wars also. This is from one side. The second thing, in relation to the anti-tanks,
anti-armed tanks.
Anti-armed tanks. What are the kinds of anti-armed tanks? And this is related to safe question. And the types of APCs which are armed, and IVSL, and the tanks that they have. The protecting them is not the same. M13 is the biggest one which was damaged. It was used since the Vietnam War, and it's the cheapest. And it was developed in Israel internally, but targeting that, it has a lot of weak points, so it's easier to target that. And if we look from lower to higher, Kabel Baim, Makalba,
Merkava 4.
Merkava 4, and the trophy is effective, except for the cases that we see. If you are closer to it, so what it does, it monitors the targeted rocket, and the cornet is laser controlled, so when it is launched, it lights up. It gives signal for the second party, and it will be censored in the trophy and monitored the attack. Therefore, it will, within 30 meters or more, it's like a shotgun. The bomblets will be launched in a frame like half a meter or 1 meter, and will respond to this rocket. It's not like the tank, the Soviet lungs. So when it hit, then it will be protecting the body of the tank. The RBJ-7, which is modified, and the tandem, which are not guided. Also, the 7th October, there were some documents that identify how to deal with the trophy and Cable 4. So there's no, according to our knowledge, you cannot deal with I disagree. There is nothing new in this war. There's nothing new. What we saw is what we saw before and previously. Maybe it's new for the audience, but not in the specialized people. Yes, in Hamas, in relation to Hamas, yes, there is something new, but in the war, nothing new. So in Ukraine, nothing new. So this is what I meant. But for the Hamas, yes, there are a lot of new things. Therefore, the number of rockets and the two dam that happen in two phases explosion, this is all modified, locally modified. And the number of the launchers, rocket launchers. I don't know what is the number. And the 5 hours is very high in Israel. So the reconstitution and repair and replenishment, if there is a shortage in certain things, that they will be replaced. And so the ability to maintain is high. And because of the siege, the 6 hours are more possible because the retention remobilization is there. In Hamas case, is less for Hamas. So this is the problem. So if you want to give you Al-Mosul case in Daesh or ISIS, they spent 10 months in Mosul and they killed all the leaders of squads in the armed forces. Iraqi are the 14 leaders of the 14 squads, they were killed. And after that, they were under siege. And in the relation to the manufacturer, there was Syria during the last combat, the last battle. They were, manufactured at that time to replace this shortage and the war. So this will give you a general framework. I hope that I answered you safe. If you have any other thing in relation to the tactical, and then I'll move in relation to the fight, close fights, it's the new thing in the resistant is the number of the titanium charges that have two phases, titanium charges, and then they attack the body, and then they try to go inside. And the electronic war, Hezbollah in 2006 invade the control room of the drones, and after that they did not do anything with the drones. He looked at what they're seeing and monitoring, and after that they put they put bombs in those areas, but the destruction on sensors, Dr. Ahmed spoke about that in the Iron Domes. This is a comment. The radars were very slower, very much slower, so the rocket of resistance will go, and the defense rocket will go behind it. So the head will go down. So this is not defense, and it will kill when it goes down. So the system is two mega. So why did this happen? We will know later. But this destruction from the radar or any other thing, we don't know. We'll know later. So there is something new here for the resistance. The topic of revenge. The revenge is very clear. Yes, there is intention for revenge, but the optics are not good. They are occupying a Shifa hospital, and they announced that this is a victory, a military victory. So you made a civil hospital who are treating civilians for civilian people. You move it and made it to military camp. This is in the Western perspective is something negative, and for the ceasefire for Netanyahu is something good. You release some women and children. So this is a winning point, and also a winning and a victory for the resistance. For 4 days that they rearranged themselves, and a big number of arrested people is not something good for the resistance. So exchange with all the conflicts, they both benefit from that. In relation to the U.S. forces, or there were consultants, and some of them were in Mosul. They were leaders in Mosul, and
consultants, advisors.
The advisors, some of them were in Mosul, and the carriers, they're there. Both of them are there, and they have special ability in relation to the signal, and also in the Air Force defense. If Hezbollah, for example, want to use 150 rockets that they have to distract the defense of Israel, they can be done through the carriers. So this is related to the Air Force. This is for me. There was a last question relating to revolution.
Fighting immunity or
Fighting
insurgency,
immunity
or insurgency.
and insurgent, when the people are having conflict with other countries, 90% they win and they have victory. And until 2002, we are speaking about the armed forces. non-government armed forces. But statistics say that the ability is decreased, but it's not ended from 90s to 2005 was 25. So the military intervention, and the other one is not related to that. You with your abilities and the field battle will identify your ability in the field battle. If the capability are high, then the reconciliation will be high, and if then the capability are low, then you will speak about reforming the the situation in prisons. We'll continue later.
Thank you, Dr. Omar. Dr. Ahmed. Dr. Omar maybe relieved me from answering some of the questions. As for the question by Dr. Amjad on the issue of the normalization and how this battle will affect normalization at the regional level, I think that this will relieve some of the regimes and reduce that. But this track is continuous. There are some of the normalizing countries have not, for example, cancelled or withdrew from this the normalization agreements and understandings, but they are still there. What I wanted to confirm, this is unequal or unequal confrontation between Hamas and Israel, and maybe the number of conflicts after 1995 and how the state actors or non-state actors who will defeat the other. As I said, Hamas is a national liberation movement. It has faced some existential tests or experiences. Hamas in 1983, before it was called Hamas, it was part of the Muslim Brotherhoods in Palestine. They purchased some of the weapons, and Ahmed Hussein, the founder of Hamas, was captured. In 1989, they captured two Israeli two soldiers, and then they were captured, and so the military experience was eliminated. In the 90s, there was intelligence failure, and that used to photocopy the archive of Al-Qassam brigades till the Intifada al-Aqsa or al-Mosque Intifada that has restored this military body. So in the Tawfa al-Aqsa is a destiny confrontation, and this is the fate of Gaza. And if we just study the historical experience of Gaza, Gaza was leading the military action even before Hamas foundation or before Hamas was founded. The military experiences in the 1950s, some of the youth, such as Abu Jihad al-Wazir, who established a brigade named Al-Haq, which established the nucleus of Al-Fatah, and that was against the Egyptian administration of Gaza Strip, trying to also launch some military attacks before the truce lines. Salah Khalaf was one of the youth who used to get rid of the Muslim Brotherhood, who founded what we call Shabibat Athar, or Avenge Youth, or Revenging Youth. So Gaza is characterized with this destiny, with this tendency towards fighting and taking military action towards its foes or other regimes. Intifada of 1987 in Gaza was the first spike, and then all other cities in the West Bank followed Gaza model and joined the Intifada. As for Hamas' political strategy, Dr. Amjad, I think that they know that war is a continuation of policy but using different means. And those who launched this military action knows what are the political events and political developments. And they said that this military act against Israel was the result was okay was the result of the Israeli was the result of Israeli attacks and violations against Al-Aqsa. We have a good model in regard that proved its ability in the issue of negotiations. There is a new model that is the Afghan model or approach, and Hamas maybe is trying to depict that to negotiate through some of mediators to achieve some of the political goals. And in the future, we might see some political movement in this side. Even if we think that Israel might go back to its rationale and to consider the military and the political battle with Hamas. Dr. Abdul Hamid Sam, I agree with you. There are two dimensions. The first dimension is that if we go back to the history books and how Israel dealt with Gaza Strip, talking about Haganah and some of the Israeli gangs in order to achieve goals. One goal is to avenge, and the other thing is the displacement and the forced displacement. And after the creating a buffer zone in the north of Gaza, is to displace its Palestinian citizens towards Sinai. Maybe this may happen over the days, but let me tell you that the international will, especially of the United States, and exercising pressure on some of the Arab countries. Maybe there is a kind of Arab resistance, especially in Egypt, in terms of in regard to displacement or forced displacement, and also the resistance of the Gazans, Gazans themselves, that they resist, but finally they are a human being, and when they are exposed to horrified and genocide, they might not be quite resistant, or their resistance might weak or got weaker. This session focusing on some of the intelligence and military perspectives, but the Palestinians are now subject to some to avenge attacks. We are talking about Israel, maybe which claims that it is a country or a state of citizen. But we need to underline or put 10 red lines beneath this or under this word. Israel is against whatever is Arab in Palestine. In regard to the fighting and some of the unequal wars in terms of attacks and defense and action and reaction, we are not talking about two systematic armies, but we are talking about some Palestinian movements who are able to defeat Israel. We know there are 300,000 soldiers which are deployed for this war. There is cooperation between the United States intelligence and the Israeli intelligence. There is a great support of some of the European countries, Germany, United Kingdom, France, and maybe some of the experiences of the Palestinian fighter and militants that make him to be resistant and firm. As for Mr. Rashid, the influence of the resistance movement, potentials of the resistance, following up on the military behavior of the movement, they are not announcing their deaths. Maybe 15,000 martyrs who are announced to be dead, but they are not announcing about the commanders and commands. And I think that the military spokesperson in the end of the battle and the fight will announce those who died or who are death. In Saif al-Aqsa 2021, some of the rockets were launched from the southern Lebanon towards north of northern Israel or northern Israel. Nobody claimed responsibility, but this is not any Palestinian act from Lebanon is taking place through coordination with Hezbollah. And the idea of the unity of battlefields, but maybe this is the first time when Israel announced that it will eliminate Hamas and its reign in Gaza. The Al-Aqsa brigade announced the death of 3 of its members, and this is a change in the fight doctrine. Hamas always focusing that the military action on in Palestine and on Palestinian lands. But Izzeddin al-Qassam statement from northern Lebanon or north of Lebanon, when they announced the death of Khalil al-Kharrad 20 days before, on the 21st of this month, that was in when Israel pumped a car near the city of Lebanon, or what we call Sur. I think that I have answered of all these questions. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed.
Dr. Muhanad, the question is the lecture and the interventions that you spoke about. 2 minutes only. First of all, sir, thank you for everybody and very deep analysis. To go back to the intervention of Dr. Hani about the relationship between policies and wars and what are the objectives of wars. Hamas did not prepare themselves politically for the war, and this is very important. They did not try to reduce the tension between them and between the Palestinian Authority. Therefore, the results of the war is not very fruitful. And Dr. Muhanad said the war of 73 was, a victory for the Arab, but the political results were not as needed. And the Middle East wars are very short wars, only days and weeks with Israel. What is the interpretation of that? Does it that the biggest reason for the collapse of authorities are the wars? So anybody who loses the war, he'll leave the authority. So is it related to that? It's political, maybe, and military point of view. And I want to listen to your point of view in this regard. Thank you so much. This symposium spoke about a lot of aspects related to the military between the Israeli and the resistance, and also for the intelligence. If you imagine that Israeli have one trusted source of information within the resistant forces, the results will be very different. So therefore, this is a very big failure, intelligence-wise, by Israel. So the intelligence is very important. And I go back to the questions, Rashid, you asked me, what is the effect of the divisions in Israel for the intelligence efforts? It is affecting that. It's not the only factor. It's one of the factors. Big officers in the military in Israel said that the biggest divisions or the divisions will affect the security of Israel, and this was mentioned many times in the media in Israel. But is it a very or the main factor? No, there are other factors, structural factors. Maybe you mentioned a number, or I mentioned a number of them, and a lot of points that I didn't touch upon because of the time limitation. Israel got intelligence information from Egypt, and Egypt denied that, but it was assured by the USA, saying that the Egyptian side provided information to Israeli forces that Hamas is about to attack Israel. But the Israeli side did not take this into consideration. The resistance within Gaza, they created neighborhoods similar to the Gaza neighborhoods to train on them. And the idea of that Israeli did not look at that. Israel, they know this information and the pictures, they know it, but the analysis in Israel thought that this is a propaganda of the resistant, especially Hamas, and the resistant is not thinking about attacking Israel. Yes, the information is that was there, but the failure in dealing with this and addressing this. The lesson learned is a lot, but the most important thing is not to utilize only technology because and depending on technology, you will fail in other aspects. You should expect what is not expected. So the intelligence bodies should expect what is not expected. The last point, when we say that Israel and other countries, they have outstanding intelligence body, another question will come. One, the intelligence bodies, they are strong in certain trends and in certain times, and they have limited abilities. Therefore, we mean that you can target them to a potential enemy or benefiting from certain new opportunities. I have received a question from Amina and the evaluation of the performance of the armed forces, Hamas, in comparison with others. The performance of Hamas was outstanding if we compare the intelligence tools in Al-Qaeda, for example. If we compare it with resistant groups, the enemies are different, the intelligence bodies are different, and the operations are different, the ideology and political targets are different. But in general, whatever I meant about the intelligence failure of Israeli means that the Hamas was better in the intelligence ones. But can they continue or not? We'll see that in the future. Very quickly, to comment on the 73, it was a strategical shock and a strategical failure, but I don't say that it's a victory, a military victory for the Arab. I think the history will say otherwise. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Muhanad. And with this, we can conclude the activities of this symposium, and we thank you. We thank the professors for their interventions. In the beginning, start with Rudolf, Dr. Rudolf, Dr. Ahmed Hussein, Muhanad, and I thank you because you stayed with us until this time. We are, we exceeded the time limit, and we wish to see you in future events by the Arab Center for Studies, Political Studies and Research. Thank you. To see you again. Thank you.